Welcome to the Health Flow Podcast. I'm your host, Jean Armand. Join me weekly as I share health information that will educate and inspire you. Please consider supporting this podcast by listening, subscribing, and rating. You can also support future episodes by making small monthly donations. Once again, welcome to the Health Flow Podcast. Podcast. Today, I'm super excited to have my guest and friend, Dr. Reginald Nesbitt. Dr. Nesbitt is a graduate of the University of Texas. He completed his residency from the University of Chicago. And correct me if I have misrepresent any of this. He has his MBA from the University of Chicago. He's been an ER physician with 15 years of experience. He's had healthcare executive positions. He's a healthcare entrepreneur, on and on and on. Welcome to the Health Flow Podcast, Dr. Nesbitt.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you.
Yeah. And did I mention he's a okay friend of mine too? A cycling buddy when I'm available and in town.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. Hey, we got to get that Selma ride in.
Definitely doing that. Definitely
Yes.
doing that.
Yes. Okay, so let's get right into it. Why did you have the desire to become a physician?
That's an interesting question. Being a physician is of course challenging, but what I've noticed is that and I do a lot of mentoring right now with college students who want to get into healthcare and specifically who want to be physicians. And what I find is everyone has their own individual reasons, but they basically all fall into two camps. Either you are what I call a legacy student or a legacy physician, meaning that someone in your family was a physician and you sort of grew up seeing that and being part of that lifestyle. And then you have the other group who I consider to be those who have some sort of seminal event that sparked their interest in medicine. I am definitely in the latter group. I'm the first physician in my family. However, I have a cousin who just graduated from Penn Medical School now. He's in his urology residency, so apparently he gets to be the legacy person. But for me, the seminal event I knew when I was a third grader that I wanted to be a physician, and I lived with my grandmother at the time, and she had what I know now to be congestive heart failure, and she wasn't terribly sick, but she was sick enough, and that's treating congestive heart failure in the 80s, which is very differently from how we treat it now. But what amazed me as a young kid was when she did get sick, how she would go to see her physician. And sometimes she had to go to the hospital and be admitted, and sometimes she didn't. But regardless of which route she took, she always came back and she was better. And my grandmother was such an important person in my own development, to where just seeing her get better for me was like, it was very important and very inspirational at the same time. And I've always had a keen interest in like science and math. I've been a nerd my entire life, a self-professed nerd, a proud nerd. But
Whatever.
no, and just sort of that, just seeing that with her, and having that own interest in sciences and math for me is what solidified it for me. I used to watch like MASH and Trapper John MD when I was a kid, and I was always like enamored with those things. But that was my seminal moment for me. It's my grandmother.
Right. That's very interesting. You're absolutely right, because just now that I have more experiences with working with physicians and even physicians in training, you are so right. There's two groups. The ones who've been like, their dad's a physician, another family member, just like a bloodline of physicians or people who lost loved ones. And that experience was so traumatic or so, I don't know if it's so much trauma, but so inspiring that it pushed them towards, I want to be a physician so I can help people because of what I saw my family go through.
Right. Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons that I do a lot of mentoring. And I've helped over 50 students get into medical school over the past, let's say 8 to 10 years now. I have sort of this de facto program that I have now. But the thing is that there's all the students prospective students that I help, none of them are legacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are all those that have had their seminal events. But the thing is, and I think a lot of times sometimes successful people or people who come from means can really underestimate the power of having someone that looks like you.
Take care of you.
Yeah, not necessarily take care of you, but someone who looks like you doing something that you want to do, right? So,
True.
so if your father's a physician or your uncle's a physician or your mother's a physician and you grew up seeing that, you can identify with that, and it's very easy for you to identify and see, well, that's something that I can attain, right? So it's one of those things that where success sort of breeds success. But all the students that I work with, none of them are legacy, and that's why I think it's very important for me to allow them to see someone that looks like them that can be something that they want to see, because oftentimes they don't see that. The physicians don't necessarily look like them. And by look like them, I don't necessarily mean race or culture. It could just be someone that you know personally, that you can call, text, put your hands on, talk to, right?
Right.
The fact that they don't have that, and the only exposure that they may have to a physician may be going to a doctor, right? And not many people have these great personal relationships with their physicians, particularly now with how sort of the management and operation of healthcare is. So I think for me, it's very important to sort of reach back and give back, because I was helped along in my journey. So I feel sort of an obligation to do the same thing for those who come behind me.
Right. I didn't this is probably not something I thought of even talking about here today, but I think it's important, and it's just bringing up those thoughts as I listen to you share. You know, I wonder, is there a difference? Well, I know the answer. Sometimes your reason for becoming who you aspire to become, say a physician, the examples that you have really make you the kind of physician you are. So part of this podcast is really was breathed in me because we get people who come back over and over again and they just don't even understand what's going on with their health. And that's multifactorial. We know that that could be their education, the stress, all of that. But another thing that I find is that who's doing the explanation? The person that's explaining to them, are they able to reach them and talk to them and explain what's going on health wise in a way that they can truly understand? So I sometimes think that this is, it's probably a little biased, and it doesn't have to be because I've seen great physicians, regardless of what you decide, how you got there from family or some event that said that that's the way you were going to go. They can be great physicians, but I don't know. I think I just tend to feel like if you had a true and honest desire to help people and to get into medicine because you want to make a difference, that is sometimes reflective on how you talk to patients and care for them.
You make excellent points. It's a very big thing. And one of the things when I was a resident and when I was teaching residents, and I still teach students and things like that now, one of the things that I always tell them is that you have to meet people where they are. you and I both have been fortunate and blessed to have, excellent educations. We have been around some very bright and intelligent people. And from an intellectual standpoint, we are sort of the one percenters, right? But what you have to do is, in order for you to effectuate outcomes for your patients, you have
Yes.
to be able to meet them where they are.
Yes.
Now, I tend to look at healthcare somewhat differently than sort of some of the mainstream, in that I believe it's a what I call a dual responsibility. We as the providers have a responsibility to not only to treat but to inform and to educate, and then the patients have a responsibility
Yes.
to comply, conform, and do what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
So, and if you there's a lot of course, healthcare is a big subject in this country, and there is always I think it is an unequal equation, an unequally weighted equation that's on the providers, where there is an equal amount that should be weighted
Responsibility.
on
Yes.
patients themselves. But
Yes.
to your point, you have to meet people where they are. And one of the mistakes that I see that happens a lot in patient education is a really, really, really big thing. And you've worked in the emergency department before. We don't have a lot of time to treat patients. There are external pressures from just the buildup of patients in the lobby that need to be seen, the patients in the ED that have not been seen, and then you of course have the external pressures from the healthcare institutions and the hospitals that are constantly pressuring you to go faster, 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 faster. It's
Right.
not always the optimal environment, but we do what we have to do. But there are times, and a lot of times, where I have patients where I can see that the education experience has not happened. I just had a patient who I've treated before on several occasions, and I seem to always treat the guy for the same thing. He misses his dialysis. He misses his dialysis weekly, right? And so I go into the room and I'm like, look, Mr. X.
Right.
Right. I like, this is, I just saw you for this last week, right? He said, yeah, and he gave me his reasoning for why he missed. And I said, Mr. X, that's the same thing you told me last week. He said,
Yeah.
no, I did not tell you such as I said, you didn't. And then I proceeded to explain to him why it was important that you can't miss dialysis. And I explained to him about the potassium getting high and causing heart arrhythmias and stopping your
Right.
heart, and explained to him about the pulmonary edema and all of this in the accelerated hypertension. And the look on his face was one of dumbfoundment. He was just
Yeah.
like,
Never
I
heard
didn't
it.
know this. I didn't know. Like, he legitimately, and of course, sometimes I do not come, I come from very meager means, right? AKA I come from the hood. Okay. So I know when someone is trying to get over on me.
Right.
He legitimately was not trying to get over on me. He didn't know. And that's a failure on our part. Now it's a failure on our part, right? For someone not to explain this to this gentleman. And once I explained it to him, he was like, "Oh, I can't miss that. I'm not trying to die." I mean, you just gotta let people know. Look, you
Yeah.
will die if you do this. This is why this happens. This is why you are on dialysis. This is what your kidneys don't do. And if you don't do this, you will die.
Yes.
Just plain speak. I met him where he was. He,
Yeah.
I understood that. He understood that. That man has no interest in dying.
Made it plain.
Right. He has no interest in dying. So we'll see. And it's no different from a lot of other things of just patients who have diabetes, who have high blood pressure, they really just don't understand why the importance of compliance is, or why what they have affects their bodies in certain ways.
Right.
So, we got to do our parts. We can't just be, prescription writers and test orderers and diagnosticians. We also have to be educators. But then again, the patients, they have to do what they're supposed to do on their part too.
Absolutely. It's twofold.
It's
It's
twofold.
twofold. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I agree. So tell me, moving on a little bit here, what's been the most rewarding thing and you found to be an emergency room physician? What do you like about being an ER physician?
For me, it is, I like the unpredictable nature I am so not a creature of habit. I'm not that dude that goes to the restaurant and orders the same thing every time. Um, well, I enjoy sort of the intellectual stimulation that you get from the ED. Of
Yeah.
course, not everything is an emergency. I mean, everything can't be an emergency by default, but you have to think your way through a lot of things.
Yes. You're
Uh, I,
detective.
yeah,
Right.
and that's the thing that I enjoy the most. It's the thought process of, okay, this person has abdominal pain, and working my way intellectually through it. And when I say working my way through it, I don't mean working my way through ordering a bunch of tests.
Right.
I mean sitting down, taking a good history, doing a good physical exam, going through my differential diagnosis, and actually thinking about what could be wrong, ruling these things out, and then ordering only what I need as a confirmatory test, not as something to diagnose somebody with, right?
Right.
So if I can't sit down and talk to you and have an 80%, 80 to 85% reasonable expectation of what's wrong with you, I don't, the test in and of itself is useless without any insight. So
Exactly.
I really I enjoy, and I enjoy interaction with people, right? I meet people that I otherwise who would look at me crazy if they saw me on the street sometimes, right? Or
Mhm.
people who share their most private and most sensitive information without even thinking twice, because there is an inherent trust that goes on. Even though I'm not their regular physician, it's in their moment, in their perceived or real acute moment of need. They're like, I need help, and you're the person that's going to help me,
Right.
right? I enjoy that. I enjoy the human element. I enjoy seeing someone get better. I enjoy when somebody is incredibly sick, and we can do something to change that.
Right.
Um, so for me, it's as much sort of the intellectual as it is the social aspects of it. And quite frankly, I enjoy not having to go to work every day. That's just part of my personality. I've never been the person that can go and do something like, I mean, emergency medicine is very intense. So to have to do that 30 days a month would probably not be good for anybody. Uh,
Right.
so for me, that's very useful, just to not, and of course I'm part time now, but it's useful to where I have built in time off for myself to enjoy me. So when I do go to work, I'm fresh and I'm ready to go, and I'm excited to be there.
Yeah. That's similar reasons why I chose I like emergency medicine also. The variety, I mean, I'd be bored if I was doing the whole, same stuff every single day.
Right.
And the investigation, the thrill of figuring out something or
Mhm.
bringing it to someone, like someone is saying, "Oh, my stomach hurt." Okay, but what are all the other reasons around your stomach hurting?
Right.
That just makes me figure out what's going on close.
Mhm.
I don't have to do a bunch of nothings if your stomach is hurting because you talk about viral illness, or
Right.
if it's your 2 days of right lower quadrant worsening fever, like it's entertainment.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, I was on the right path. So yeah, I enjoy it too. All right, so what has not been like, what's your most challenging, what is most challenging working in the emergency room as a physician? What do you find most challenging?
Probably the environment and the change in healthcare itself. There is, of course, it's a business like anything else, and I certainly understand and appreciate that. I think some of the things that can be challenging is the sheer volume of patients and some of the expectations to get patients seen properly, which is always a priority, um, but to also move them through as quickly as possible. There's a delicate balance because you thinking and working your way through essentially someone who you've never seen before, don't have a relationship, don't know, and you have to really work through what their issues are. There's a delicate balance between efficiency and safety.
Hmm.
So I think some of the external pressures that come from throughput times and things of that nature that have increasingly become more important as the financing of healthcare comes into play, makes its way directly challenging into the actual operations of 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 emergency medicine itself. And it's not just the ED; it's everywhere else as well. Um, things such as staffing. If you go to work and um, you may not necessarily have enough nursing staff or ancillary support staff, that really affects your ability to effectively and efficiently treat patients. Um, it's more the external things that I find more challenging than the patients themselves. Of course, there are difficult patients. There are extremely difficult patients, but it's the ED, right?
Right.
So nobody reasonably expects and wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, you know what? I think I'm gonna have a heart attack, or I think I'm gonna have a stroke, or I think I'm gonna get in a car accident," right? So you can have some difficult personalities that come in, but they're coming in under duress. And if it may not be them, it may be their family members. People's lives, of course, change in seconds, change in an instant. And so, for that standpoint, that can be challenging. But I find sort of the externalities and the management of the ED to be substantially more challenging than any patient.
Right. And I think what's challenging actually is not the patient you're caring for at that moment, but I want everyone to really know, like the general population, that we do triage patients. We do decide who's an emergency and who's not. And believe me, if you were having a heart attack, you would go on top. You would be number one. But if
Absolutely.
you're just having signs of colds, you're going to have to wait. We take the emergency, it's called an emergency room. So we love all our patients, but, you know, understand it's the people who are waiting the longest who cause the most problem.
Right.
We want to take care of you all.
That's right. Their definition of an emergency may not necessarily mean our definition of emergency, and,
Exactly.
and ultimately, it's our definition that counts.
Exactly. So just try to be understanding and know, like I said, if you had an acute illness, you'd jump right to the top. You'd
Right.
be priority. All right. So what do you think are the top 5 reasons based on your experience that people come to the ER?
By far, the first,
5 reasons actually that they should come. Give them 5. We want to educate. Why should a person come to the ER? When is it appropriate? 5 top.
okay, so why they should come?
Yes. When should they go?
Okay. Um, Symptoms of chest pain, and that's by far the most common reason that we see people. I would say any concern that you may be having a, a stroke or any other significant neurologic issue. I would say if someone obviously is altered in their mentation, or if they are unconscious, or anything remotely similar to that, I would definitely say come to the emergency department. Um, I'd say abdominal pain too, because that could be tricky. It's very difficult for the layperson to figure that out. I know everyone likes to depend on Google, Dr. Google and WebMD, but of course that sometimes makes things worse because they come in thinking they have exotic illnesses that they absolutely do not have. um,
Oh, help us, Lord.
I'd say any traumatic event definitely come in. Any orthopedic trauma event, any significant traumatic event at home that happens, falls, any sort of major injuries, I would say definitely come in. Fever, I'd say fever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be
And
my
I'd even like to add any kind of mental breakdown,
yeah, absolutely,
unexpected.
absolutely.
Unexpected. We don't want to forget about our mental illness.
Right, and I guess I should have slotted that in with the sort of the altered mental status. We think of altered mental status primarily of medical, of well, non-mental health related sort of metabolic and issues that can cause you to have mental status changes. But mental status changes can be absolutely cause for mental health. So there is concern for that because mental health issues can rapidly turn into other medical issues if not taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. What do you think are realistic expectations from the public when they come to the emergency room? Realistic.
Realistic expectations. I
Yes.
I would say that if I could change one thing about people's expectation in the ED
Okay.
is that you are not the only patient in the emergency department.
Yes.
It does not make you any less important than anyone that's there.
Right.
Triage aside,
Hmm.
but you are not the only person there. And I think if patients could have a little bit more patience, pun intended, um, with regards to their stay, their workup. And of course, not anything excessive and not having anything to do with us not informing people
Right.
at all. But let's say if you're duly informed, um, please recognize that you're not the only person there.
Right.
Please recognize that you are dealing with an incredible group of physician and nurses and support staff who are taking care of a lot of people every day. This may be your only day coming in, but this
Right.
is what they do all of the time. And it's a very taxing environment. I wish that people would sometimes show a bit more respect than they do. And
Yes.
and this is and understand that this is not the grocery store. This is not Walmart. This is not a restaurant, right? This is not something that, you sort of pat your feet and be like, okay, what's going on? What's taking so long?
Right.
Well, if you are requiring a substantial workup because there may be something significantly wrong with you, let us take our time to do that. Not excessive amount of time, but let us work our way through these issues.
Right.
Please be understanding that like I said, you're not the only one there. So I think sometimes we become victims of the fast paced, instantaneous culture that we live in, and people bring those expectations into the
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
ED themselves.
Yes.
I have had patients and family members speak to me as if they own me,
Yeah.
and they don't. And I
Exactly.
let them know that they don't.
Yeah.
I will let you know that I did not seek. If you sought me out, you are seeking the expert advice and treatment of an expert, and there's only one expert in this room because if you were, you wouldn't be here, right?
Right.
So let's show mutual respect. I will absolutely afford you all the respect. Everyone gets called Mr. and Mrs. I'm not rolling up in rooms calling people by their first names, right? I'm affording people the appropriate amount of respect. And I'm respecting the fact that they're there. I'm respecting the fact that something has occurred that made you show up for an unscheduled visit to the emergency department. I'm respecting your feelings. I'm respecting your anxieties. I'm respecting your concerns, but I also likewise expect you to respect me as a human being in return.
Exactly. And also to know that we in the emergency room, we're working with many other departments.
Right,
It doesn't all happen in the ER.
right,
We have a laboratory department that samples have to go. They deal with inpatient and the emergency room. You have radiology. There's a lot of different things that people are not privy of. So please understand, I always say it's my goal to get you out of here as soon as possible. We pride ourselves in not having a full ER. We want you out.
right.
Just
I don't even want you. I don't even want you here.
yes. I
Right.
mean, come on.
You
We're
know,
doing our best.
Absolutely. But that notwithstanding, like I don't have any expectation that any patient is going to have the insight to the inner workings of a hospital that I have. I don't.
Right.
I have no expectation, and I would never place that undue expectation on the patient. What
Right.
I do have an expectation of a patient to do is act like they got some sense and treat me like they got some sense and respect. That's what I have the expectation of.
Yes. And they're going to get the utmost respect. And we pride ourselves in taking excellent care of everybody, every time, all the time. Like, this is what we do. This is what we want to do. We've chosen to do. We love it.
Right. This is what
Please.
I do. I frequently tell people, look, I don't come to your job, tell you how to do your job.
Thank you. Say it all the time. I do not go to the mechanic and tell him how to change my oil.
That's right. Is that what I do? Right. This is what you do. And I
Yes.
respect your expertise.
All right. So now here we are. It's October. Flu season is amongst us. And we know from October through the new year, it's like one
The
of the
bane of
worst
existence.
times. Well, actually, probably through March. Let me say, it's probably through March. That is the busiest season for the emergency room. Do you agree?
I'd agree. I'd agree.
Okay, so with flu season among us, our busy season, give some advice about people coming to the ER for the flu. Just who should really come and who shouldn't? Who can wait a little bit and who can't or shouldn't?
You know,
It's hard.
it's not. No, it's not. What it is. It's frustrating. Is what it is.
Yes, yes,
It's not hard, but it's because you get these confounding variables, right? But fundamentally, the people that are affected the most by the flu are your vulnerable populations.
and who are those?
Those are the very, very young, the infants, the babies, right? The infants and the babies, right?
Yeah,
Those who have not developed their full complement of immunity.
right.
And then you have at the other extreme, you have the elderly
Yes,
who have waning immunity just due to age.
right.
And then you have those who are susceptible due to respiratory illnesses, those um, who have
Asthma,
unrelenting asthma and COPD and pulmonary sarcoid and things of that nature, right?
right.
They are definitely susceptible because the influenza virus can certainly trigger not only an acute viral illness, but it can also set off those respiratory illnesses themselves. I would also throw in a group of people who are immunocompromised. Your
Right.
diabetics, your patients who have cancer or chemotherapy, your patients who are taking steroids for a multitude of illnesses. You know, anybody who's immunocompromised. Um, Other than that,
Everyone else.
yeah, what else? Power through it, right? You know, power through it.
Hydration,
Hey,
keep your
you know,
fever,
yeah,
and rest.
yeah, rest, right? You know, and don't get it wrong. Look, I know it is it is extremely uncomfortable. The myalgias are uncomfortable. The fever is uncomfortable. The headache is uncomfortable. The nausea and the vomiting is extremely uncomfortable, right? All of those things are, and you absolutely could get Tamiflu to shorten the course of your illness. The problem becomes when you have a mass number of people that show up with perceived flu who may not have flu, but now you're mixing them in with the sick population, right? And it's like you're concentrating pathogens all into one area. So, you know,
Yes.
wash your hands. Wash your hands frequently. You know, let's not sneeze in each other's space. Let's not, just indiscriminately drink after everyone who may be sick.
And who does that anyway?
Right. So those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on it. And you get conflicting things from you get conflicting things. You get conflicting things from some healthcare organizations and from the CDC. I mean, it's what the CDC sort of sticks to kind of what I'm saying here. But you know, let's if those if I could just sort of snap my fingers and have that population show up, then yes. Now, of course, you can not be in that population and get very sick from the flu. It can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. And if something you certainly are not feeling well, or you're
Right.
progressing you're have worsening of progression, absolutely show up and get treated, because there are some serious consequences that can occur from having the flu.
Right.
But by far and large, most people who don't fall into those aforementioned camps, they don't have the complications.
Right. Exactly. All right. So, one final question. So, any particular advice you have to give the audience about living a healthier life? What's your take on living a healthier life or a healthy life?
A healthy life. You know what? Yeah, I got some tips on that.
Share it.
I
Tell
got
us.
some tips on that. You know, um, when I turned 40, that was the very first time that I ever, even remotely in my life, I think I had this conversation with you before when we were riding our bike, remotely contemplated my own mortality, right? Because before then, you know, you're in your 20s, you're indestructible. Well, in your teenager, you just, the concept of sickness and mortality does not exist. And in your 20s, you think you're indestructible. And then in your 30s, you're developing as an adult and trying to live your life. But there's something magical about turning 40, right? I'm not talking about some crazy, non-existent midlife crisis nonsense. But it was just the thought of, wow, I'm 40, and in 40 more years, I'll be 80. And 60 years from now, I could be 100. And it was just like, huh. And my brother always famously says, he's like, you know what? He said, I got to live my life. I got to live my life the way I have to live, because the first 40 may not be as good as the second 40.
Right.
And so, what I would do if I were people about living a healthier life, I first and foremost would probably clean up my diet.
Yeah.
I would just absolutely clean up the diet and just eat better. If you have a nice car and that nice car requires you to put unleaded gas in it to fuel it, anybody who owns that nice car, nobody even remotely thinks of trying to do regular gas in that.
Exactly.
Nobody in their right mind would do that, and they don't.
Yes.
I don't know if you recall, but I think it was around 2007, 2008, where there was a gas shortage, the
I
oil shortage.
recall. I
You
recall.
recall that? Okay. I was tooling around, commuting. I was commuting when I was starting one of my first companies, and I was tooling around, and I had a little small Lexus IS 250, a little small Lexus, and it required unleaded gas. And when we had that oil shortage and subsequently that gas shortage, and these gas trucks couldn't make it, and we were running out of premium fuel, I was forced to put regular gas in
Wow.
the car. And let me tell you something, that car never drove any
Bro.
worse. That car sputtered. That car wouldn't accelerate. That car was stopping. It was doing all manner of anything except for what I needed it to do, right? And it just let me know, you know what? Premium performance requires premium gas. Your bodies are the same way,
Yeah.
right? Eat like you have some good sense, okay? Eat like you have some good sense, because your body is a much more finely tuned machine than your car is.
Yes.
Your car at best may last 20, 30 years with a bunch of retooling and doing things to it.
Exactly.
Okay, but the life expectancy of an adult now is 75, 80 years old. Come on, you're doubling that of a machine. So I would say clean up your diet. And that's something that I've done for myself, and I've never felt better. Um, you know, vegetables, fruits, lean meats, eat like you got some sense. Basically, if you go to the grocery store, stay on the outskirts of the store.
True. That
Okay.
is absolutely right.
Right. Like there's nothing in those middle aisles in general that you may
Never
need.
thought of it that way.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
Nothing in those middle aisles that you just absolutely need. Like what's on the outside of the store? The outside of the store is gonna be your meats, your vegetables, right?
Mhm.
You're sometimes your dairy and and your produce and things like that, right? But when you start getting the interior, where all the packaging and all that nonsense is, the processed stuff, you gotta stay away from that, man.
Yes.
And because it's there's enough information, like the internet's free now. Information is literally at your fingertips. So we cannot say that ignorance is an excuse. One
Mhm.
of the things I would advise everyone to learn how to do is read a food label. Not the front of the food labels, but the back of the food label, the actual back of the food label.
Ingredients. Yes.
Yeah, because companies are not, and don't get me wrong, I am Mr. Corporate. I believe in business, I believe in entrepreneurship, I believe in everything else, but I also believe in being honest. And because there is no true regulation as to what you should put on packaging, you will see companies, you'll see packaging that says, for instance, oh, this is only 1 gram of sugar in something, right? Then you
Right.
flip it over the back and it's got like 60 carbohydrates in it, and they'll say, well, one of these is sugar. Well, the rest of those carbohydrates are going to get converted into sugar. So it's really 60, not one. So that's a little misleading, right?
Right.
But it's up to us as individuals and humans to learn, right? And like I said, information is literally at our fingertips, in our smartphones, in our tablets, and with each other, right? There's no longer this asymmetric information. So learn better, do better, eat better. Your body will reward you with better sleep, better energy, better clarity of thought, right? Longevity. Things that you may have can go away. The second things that I would suggest that people do is get some form of exercise, right? I'm not saying everyone needs to join a gym. Everyone needs to be an athlete like you and I are, elite cyclists. Right? Elite cyclists and elite gymnasts and CrossFitters, right? Not everyone has to
You
do that.
put me in that category.
Well,
Thank you. Thank
hey,
you.
I respect your game.
I appreciate that.
But what I tell patients all the time is, you know, you have 2 feet, use them. You can walk, right?
Yeah.
And I'll use my mother as an example. My father died in 1990 when I was 15 years old, and I was no, I was 30, I'm sorry, 14 years old. I was in the ninth grade. My mother at that time was 40. I think she was 42 years old, and they had been married for 25 years, the love of her life. But my mother, wonderful woman, but she was overweight. Just plain and simple, she was overweight. I've been an athlete all my life, played basketball, ran track, and at that time when my dad died, I was on the basketball team, but it was springtime, so I was running track. And I helped my mother through that grieving period with, some patience. And then I had to give her some other harsh words because everyone knows I don't have much of a filter. Um, but she was she was substantially overweight, like to the tune of 250, 60, 70 pounds, maybe a size 20, 23, 24. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? It's time for us to do better. It's time for you to do better. And what I would do is that instead of having her pick me up from track practice, I would have her come to track practice and just walk a lap. We just started out with just walking a lap around the track, on the outskirts of the track. And everybody knew it was my mom, so nobody was going to give her any flack for walking around track during track practice.
Right.
And one lap turned into 2 laps, and 2 laps turned into three, and three turns into four. And four, of course, 4 laps around track is, of course, a mile. And she progressed to walking 1 mile, then 2 miles, and then a light jog, many months after that. And then I got home and we cleaned up the diet. And once we got the diet cleaned up, and then she began to jog, and then of course the weight began to just really substantially fall off. More so from diet than exercise. And if I can help any listener with anything, weight management is 80% of it is what you put in your mouth.
Yeah.
You will never ever ever be able to out exercise a bad diet. Period. Just can't do
I had to learn that. Yeah.
it.
Yes.
I think we've all learned that the hard way at some point,
Yes.
right? But
Yes.
you cannot out exercise a bad diet. And so once we got her diet cleaned up and then she began to become more physically active, then I transitioned my mother to um, into a gym, and we had her join a gym, and I taught her how to exercise. We started out with the machines, and then free weights, and you know. My mother is 30 years older than me. She's 70, she turns 75 this year.
Mhm.
My mother weighs 145 pounds now, 145, 150, 60 pounds maybe.
A good weight.
A good weight. And she looks, certainly does not look like she's 74. On a bad day, she may look 50
Some.
and is on not a single diabetic medication, not on a single hypertensive medication,
Hmm.
any substantial surgeries, no strokes, no anything, nothing major. She's never smoked. Um, so, I mean, she's probably lost over that period of time. She's probably lost 100 pounds easily.
Amazing.
And to this day, she goes to the gym at 75 years old now,
Yeah.
goes to the gym daily. She runs on the treadmill, she works out with free weights, and she looks amazing. And her body and her life is more amazing for it. Now I look at some of her siblings, and her siblings have diabetes and high blood pressure, and several have had strokes and heart attacks and congestive heart failure, and have had surgeries for vascular disease, and they essentially have been putting regular gas in a car that requires premium, and it shows. And
Yeah.
these effects are cumulative. So I'd say diet, exercise. Um, I would also say figure out something that you enjoy doing
Yes.
and do it,
Yes.
right? Do it. Leave behind the reasons and the excuses that something cannot be done.
Right.
Just whatever that is. If it's, if it's cycling, for me, it's with cycling and gymnastics rings, or if it's traveling, or if it's writing, or whatever it is, find that thing that you want to
That
do and
makes you tick.
that makes you tick. And
Yeah.
not only do it, but be the best at it, right?
Right.
Be best at it, right?
Yeah.
There is this culture that, and I don't know when this happened, but I'm going to tread lightly here, but there's this culture of sort of backlash against being elite, right? I remember there was a time when being elite was a good thing,
Thing.
and or but now it's just like if you even mention the word of something being elite, other than an athlete,
Right.
then you get sort of this backlash about it. And I think that is so incredibly unfortunate because I guarantee you, if I were a patient, I would not want to go to a non-elite physician.
That's right. I wouldn't either.
If I ever found myself in the need of the service of a lawyer, I wouldn't want to go to a non-elite lawyer.
Hmm.
If I'm building a home or if I'm buying a house, and I don't want a non-elite builder. I mean, so
Right.
figure out what those things are for you and do them and just enjoy them and be the best at it. I'd say another thing is to care less about what others are thinking about you.
Amen.
Care less. Care less. Now, that's not to say be a bad person, be a jerk, be arrogant. We're not saying that. But what I am saying is that build your own self confidence and rely on the people that are important to you. I it's funny because I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on anything, right? And sometimes my friends or I have friends that will look, I don't understand how you know. I was like, because I don't feel the need to capitulate to strangers. Like, why do I care about somebody who doesn't know me? Why do I care about the things of someone who does not know fundamentally who I am? Keyboard warriors. I don't care about keyboard warriors, right? But
Right.
I do care about my family, my friends. I care about more about what Jean Armand thinks than some random person in Iowa who does not know who I am.
Right.
So care less about what others think. Form relationships, solidify those relationships with people who are in your circle. And I would also say expand your circle. Learn things. I would say another thing is to learn things. Like don't this is a separate point, but like don't become stagnant. And
Yeah.
I always tell people, I always tell people that I mentor, I say, learn about something that you don't know about, right? We frequently find ourselves gravitating back to things that we like. Get outside of your comfort zone, right? Grow, develop, and become exposed because you'll never know when you need to have that conversation about that Monet painting. Or you may never know when you need to have that conversation about Mies Random with with architecture or whatever it is. I read every single day, and I read something differently every single day. And I think read things that are in my wheelhouse. I read things that are not in my wheelhouse, and it makes you a more well-rounded person. It makes you a more interesting person because you never know who you will meet, what conversations can come from it, and how it can benefit you, or more importantly, how you can benefit someone else.
Totally agree. And if I can add anything to it, I would say find joy.
Yeah,
Seriously, I know that we all don't have things, that we want, or the relationships or mates and things like that, whatever it is your desire is. But those things, you can still find joy. Focus on your positive. Be grateful and thankful for what you have. You have two arms, two legs, a mind that's still sharp. You're energetic. I mean, just relieve yourself from the stress.
I agree. You know,
Enjoy your life.
I agree. People undervalue two arms and two legs until they lose them. they take vision for granted until they go
Yes.
blind, right?
And
So
unfortunately, we see this kind of stuff on a daily basis.
on a
People
daily
are
basis.
missing limbs,
Hmm.
vision,
Hmm.
processes, the ability to speak. What is more frustrating than seeing a stroke person that understand everything you're saying, but the
Absolutely.
words cannot come out? So
Absolutely.
there is something you could wake up every single day and have a grateful attitude. Be gratified, like show, like my God, I'm excited. Okay?
Absolutely.
I'm excited. I'm excited for health. I'm
For
excited
health.
for strength. I'm
Absolutely.
excited for friendship.
Absolutely. And not, let me add this to what you're saying. Be excited. Everything that you just said are things that we should be excited about. And none of them are materialistic things, right? None of them are materialistic things.
Because they
Not
don't make you. Material
they
things
do
don't.
not, absolutely, they do not make you who you are. Not everyone is going to be a billionaire. Not everyone's going to be a millionaire. My grandmother always said this. She says, not everybody can get a book, but everybody can be a good person. Like she always said that. Now that being said, she did force those books on me, which I'm grateful for. But
Right.
that's because she saw the potential. But more importantly, she was infusing me with a sense of decency, right? And
Right.
you treat people well, and let's not be as materialistic as we have to be, because you know what, in the end you ain't taking none of this stuff with you anyway.
Right.
Okay, the Egyptians thousands of years ago built many tombs for their pharaohs and for the other hierarchy, and they
Listen,
filled them with all these materialistic things, and guess what happened? Grave robbers came through. Okay, right?
listen, we are having so much fun. You know we're gonna have to do this again. We done
Absolutely.
started something. This is special. It's already like 52 minutes. What was supposed to be 30 minutes.
My
Okay.
apologies. My apologies.
And we still have a whole lot more to talk about. So we're gonna have to finish this. Do you want to share with anyone that may be interested in your mentorship program? You want to share any information about how to contact you?
Sure. Probably one of the easier ways is to, well, you know what? I'll give my email. I'm not going to just give my random phone number out like that because, hey.
And I'll include your email on our on the podcast notes.
Sure, and that's rcnesbitt1 at yahoo.com. And with anything else, like I always tell anybody that I mentor, is like I don't reach out to people. I'll let people reach out to me because I like to separate the wheat from the shaft. So if someone is serious, I'm all
They'll
in. But if,
contact
you, if you're not serious,
you. Right.
then that means that I don't have to waste my most precious commodity, my time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this has been amazing. It really has. And talking about stepping out of your comfort zone, this is surely out of my comfort zone. And I've learned, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm loving life. and I'm only wanting to empower people to live the very best life that they can. So thank you so much
No
for being on
problem.
the Health Flow podcast.
I am happy to be a part of your legacy.
Thank you. You're going to remain there too as a good friend. Thank you for listening to the Health Flow podcast. Your support is much appreciated. It is my goal to share health information that you find helpful. Email topics of interest to thehealthflow@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram at thehealthflow, also on Facebook at The Health Flow. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, keep your health flowing.